Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk 1210 KEVT, Sahuarita, Tucson. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And it is my honor to bring in one of the most gifted and unheralded drummers in this country's history, Rick Quintanal. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor and a surprise to be here.
Oh, man, that's what I love doing the most, man. My show has been fueled by the unsung characters, and looking into your history and what you've done up to the current day. It's really quite an honor to talk to you, man. So thanks for making the time.
So obviously you knew I play with Malo. That's why you played that piece.
Oi, Mama. Yeah. No, I mean, it's kind of hard to. I guess that would be the obvious question, starting a little bit forwards before backwards. But, Rick, how did you find a way to get your own individual voice into a rhythm section that included bongos, congas, timbales, and then your trap set? I think for a lot of younger artists out there, a lot of that ethnic percussion has been stripped out of the live context, but I just would like you to talk about how you were able to get your own voice in there.
I guess the honest answer is I had no preconceived concept of what was supposed to happen. I just played and I jumped in. I mean, that particular rhythm section was incredible, with Francisco Agobela and Leo Rosales. So, I mean, I had come from a jazz and rock format before I joined that band. So when I got the gig with them, I just played.
Right.
And interestingly enough, we butted heads a few times in the rhythm section, saying that maybe I was playing too much. So I had to learn, over time to be my voice, say what I had to say, but also respect everybody else's part in the whole tapestry of what makes a really great, rhythmic concept. It's a tapestry that happens, So it's just, for me, it's always been just deep listening, and loving music, loving the drums, and just listening. And the music, by grace, has kind of always showed me what to do. And most of the time, it's worked out.
Could you give an example of one of these kerfuffles, so to speak, when Aguabella would look over at you and tell you to quiet down, how you dealt with your ego, and then ultimately how you worked yourself into the situation?
Well, I remember one argument we got in backstage one day where Francisco was saying that that I was playing too much, and my ego kicked in. And I said, "Well, how come you get to play so much and I don't?" But that's just youth and young arrogance, So we worked through that, and I listened, and then I just started listening more. How'd I work through that? Main thing is having respect for other musicians, for the other musicians you're playing with. And interesting, the thing that I've been learning more, I've been playing a long time now, so this is like, we're talking about kind of ancient history for me now. And what I'm learning now is just really even deep listening to the rhythm and the power of the drums, and the music will always show you what to do. And a lot of times I'm learning as I get older, less is more. There's more power and simplicity and playing what's appropriate and not, again, when we're all growing up, we're developing chops and we're, listening to whoever and trying to get all our stuff in, when we can. And that's just part of the process of growing up and maturing as a human being and a musician, But at a certain point, that the ego drops. Mainly if you want to keep the gig, too. That's a big part of it.
Already having a ball with Quintanal. I got to tell you, just to give the audience a little bit of background, I'm a voracious record collector, and I happened to, stumble upon the San Francisco label, which at a period of time in our history, you referred to it as ancient history, but I think it was just the most unbelievably vibrant time.
It was a rich time.
It was a rich time, and I find this really peculiar album named Victoria, and
oh wow!
And the thing is this, though, I've interviewed Garibaldi. It seems like 25 times. I think it's only been about 2 or 3, but he, I'm always fascinated by him because, he has just held down this gig with Tower of Power for so long, and he never really he was not a Jim Keltner or a Hal Blaine kind of guy. Could have been maybe, but he was not a studio cat. And I asked him, I said one time, did you ever get into a situation where you played on a studio album? And he mentioned this chick. He just called her a chick. It was a chick album, and he got, without getting into detail, it didn't work out. And I found this out, and he said it was with Herbie Hancock. And I said, this is fascinating. And then I find this album, Victoria, and I look at it and I say, my God, there's Herbie, there's the chick, and Rick Quintanal. And so I texted Garibaldi. I said, have you seen, where's Rick Quintanal at? He's like, dude, we were just hanging out here 2 weeks ago. And I said, let me connect with him. So that's how it happened, man.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's deep. It goes real deep.
God bless you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. And
how do I get a copy of that? I'd love to hear that again.
You give me your address. I got like 3 I got it on vinyl. I only collect vinyl. You can't even get that on CD. It's one of the most trippy, cool albums. I don't think there's drums on every track. Do you remember getting the call for that gig? How did that work out?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was just to back up a little bit. I mean, from college, I ended up leaving college, and I joined the Don Ellis band. So I got to do that for about a year and a half, and that was fantastic, obviously. Wow. And then I started getting some studio work in L.A., known as like the rock drummer from San Francisco. I did a Ray Conniff recording session, which is pretty trippy. But
hold on, this is really cool. You were in the studios. At what years were these?
This is like late 60s. Late 69, 70, something like that,
Was it like at, Great Western Studios? Like which studios did you?
Well, that was with CBS, because that was like through Don Ellis was hooked up with CBS, so it was mainly as the CBS studios. I had, when Don Ellis, the band was awesome, and then Don started, went in more into a rock. I was on the album with him called Don Ellis Goes Underground, and it was a cool album, but I wasn't liking musically where it was going, and again, short-sightedness. I mean, that was just a phase he went through, and he went on to do absolutely incredible things after that. But anyway, I left that, and I hooked up with this band in San Francisco called Indian Puddin and Pipe. It was called The Pipe, and it was an awesome band. It was like a combination of Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Chicago.
Yeah.
And David Rubinson, who was one of the top producers in the Bay Area, loved us. He said, "Oh, you're one of the best bands, happening right now." But our manager had been involved in a lot of lawsuits with Jefferson Airplane, Moby Grape, Beautiful Day, so nobody in the business wanted to touch the band. So that was a big heartbreak. But anyway, through that connection, I hooked up with David Rubinson. So he's the one that called me to do this recording session with Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I crave hearing Garibaldi outside of the Tower of Power, but yet Quintanal you fit the bill on this album. I mean, it's more of a psych folk album. Do you mind who was your manager that gave you the bad rap?
That was Matthew Cates.
So you're telling me that despite the Pipe, Puddin Pipe, being Rubinson, I interviewed him maybe a month ago. We got part 2 coming up around Thanksgiving.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
awesome.
He's out in France right now. But, that guy, take it or leave it, probably an abrasive character, but a great ear, great taste in music. And you're telling me that because of all the drama by your manager, nobody wanted to even deal with the music itself?
Yep.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Because 2 of the guys in the band had sealed, had contracts with Matthew, and I didn't, So that was again a really painful time because the music was so great, and we even now check this out. This doesn't happen much anymore, but Don Ellis loved the band. So one day he was playing at Mr. D's in San Francisco, and he invited our band to sit in with his band during the show.
This is what I'm talking about.
We played, and then Don, spontaneously had horn arrangements going behind the band. George Duke was on keyboards with Don's band at that time. So,
what year was that? Boy,
I should have done more homework here, but I'm thinking, let's see.
It's not a fluff interview.
Like around, 70-ish, I'm thinking around 70, 71.
Yeah, well, that Underground album, I never knew you were on that. I've been interviewing the jazzers, since I started my show in January 2011, and you're probably about the 550th guest that I've had. But the Don Menza was with Don Ellis, and man, he was playing straight ahead. I don't know, you want to call it post bop. He was really playing just straight ahead. And then Menza got out of the Army and he met up with Don, and he was playing 13/7 time signature, 15/9. It was freaking him out. And he didn't want to deal with it. You were one of these odd time signature cats that was playing drums with him? Is that true?
Well, yes, and at the time, Ralph Humphrey, great jazz drummer, LA studio guy. He was the main drummer in the band. And
sure.
Ralph and I had grown up, in Castro Valley, California, played a lot together in high school. So when an opening happened and, Don was looking for another drummer, we had three drummers in the band at the time, 3 drum sets and percussion, congas. So
three drum
I was
sets.
One of the drummers. So Ralph Humphrey was the main guy, I could play odd times, but Ralph was the master at it, So with the really hard stuff, that was Ralph's turn to play,
In a live context, you had 3 trap sets on the stage?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just for someone from my generation, I was born in 78. Can you talk about how you guys worked that out? Were you all playing the trap? What was your role with? Maybe Ralph was holding it down, but what were you guys? Were you all 3 playing at the same time?
We had different percussion parts we were playing, or different parts, drum set parts. So Ralph was like the main guy, and then we would just reinforce it with, sometimes just different percussion things or different parts we had worked out, And the big, whenever things got really big, everybody would kick in. So the thing that band was so great. And whenever that band played, it was so exciting. People would stand up and cheer. It was so exciting, So obviously the power of a lot of drums kicking a big band made that happen. And then we had, of course, the big finale, with the drum solos, and each guy would take a turn, and then we'd have a whole section where I had a whole thing worked out where we'd all play together, and then the big band would kick back in. And so it was, part playing and some unison, but mostly part playing at that time,
any tapes I could hear of that stuff. You were the only album you were on was Underground. Were you on any other albums?
Yeah, no, just that one.
Yeah, because you're a mercurial cat, man. You look up Quintanal on All Music. There's some amazing stuff that you did, but I think there's even more out there that you haven't even gotten credit. This Ray Conniff thing is a revelation to me at this point.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't draw too much attention to that. It worked,
Where did you grow up though?
I grew up in Castro Valley, California.
Did you wind up then? Did you go to the Pacific Northwest first, or how did? Tell me about your early travels or your first real professional gig.
My first professional gig was I think in the 8th grade, when we had a little dance band, and my dad drove us to the gig, and we got paid for it.
But I guess more to the more.
But after that,
yeah.
it's so, again, that period was so rich. I played with a band called Magnificent Seven, which there's another really famous Magnificent Seven, but we were a local R&B band, and actually Rufus Miller was our singer, and he ended up being the first singer with Tower of Power, so we all sort of knew each other. But that Magnificent Seven was kind of the first working band I was playing with, and we'd do that time. There was so much music, and I remember one of my favorite memories of that was Sly Stone was playing in the clubs at that time, and there was this club called Frenchie's in Hayward, California, and that club had 2 bands, so our band played opposite Sly Stone for a few weeks. Actually, when they were in the studio, actually recording Dance to the Music, so. That is
Greg Arico. I've interviewed him a couple times.
He's great.
Dude,
and before that, I was more of a jazz guy. I didn't take rock and pop drumming that seriously. But when I heard Greg, he blew my mind. And then after that, when I'm hearing another big influence in the rock world was Carmine Appice. When I heard Vanilla Fudge, it was like, holy smokes, you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, this is where the pocket of Jake Feinberg lies. I'm curious when you were, if you could, for the audience. I mean, I know when Garibaldi went to L.A. in the mid '80s, it was an unsatisfying experience, and it had become kind of a mercenary scene. But in the fertile time that we have been talking about, could you talk about the viability of Southern California, the live music scene, the opportunities to play, whether it was still a mercenary scene at that time, and then juxtapose that to when you moved to the Bay Area and that freedom sound of San Francisco?
I actually never. I always lived in the Bay Area, so I can't really speak that much. I lived in L.A. a little bit, but I can't really speak, intelligently about the whole scene and everything that was happening at that time. Most of my experience was in the Bay Area and based out of that,
Even as a rock session drummer, you just drive down.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay, so you grew up in the Bay Area. Can you talk about? Did you ever get to go over to Jimbo's Bop City at all?
No. Where was that?
That was in I want to say it was the North Beach area. I mean, it was one of these clubs that it was the first real club where cats like Dick Burke and Jerry Granelli and Pony cats would come in there, and you would get up on the, like, Miles or Philly Joe with Miles would come in, and then like some of the band would get off the stage. Miles would stay on, but cats could come and sit in. You could be underage, and you get up on the bandstand, and if you could play, they'd play with you. If you couldn't, they'd just walk off the stage. It's like Pony Poindexter would come in there, but that was sort of the real. What would you say? I mean, were you doing the on Broadway with Magnificent Seven? Were you playing? I'm just trying.
We were doing, club, bars and clubs. The main jazz club I got hooked up with during that time period was Keystone Corner. Remember that place?
Well, I've interviewed Todd Barkin quite a bit. You're talking about after it went from Herrera to where it became a strictly jazz club.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, tell me a little bit about your experience with the Keystone, because you read the books, you look at the pictures, the tapestries, and just the idea that Woody Shaw and Bobby Hutcherson could be coming in for 7 straight days at a time.
Yep.
Can you talk about a memorable experience, especially with the cast like Elvin or Art Blakey, guys that you got off on, jazzers that you really got off on when you were younger?
Wow. Boy, yeah, I got to see all those guys in that club up close, and it was the thing. One of the things I really loved about that club and that time period was that jazz was like the music of the musical warriors. So when guys stepped up to do a solo, it was like they were stepping up to, for a transformative experience and took the audience with them. You start off with the solo with the cool lines and then the build and build. The point, and in those days, everybody in the audience was listening, and when it got to like the peak experience, people were cheering. It was like a victory of the soul for everybody in the room. That's one of the main things I remember about that whole place. And I remember standing right behind McCoy Tyner when he was playing with Alphonse Mouzon and feeling like a force there that felt like the Yosemite Falls or, incredible life force and energy. And all the musicians at that time that came through there, they were all like really just going for it. And in an environment that was rich and fertile, and everybody wanted to hear them be successful in the moment. I guess I can say that.
No, I mean you are maybe unbeknownst to you, you're a poet as well. I mean, this is what my show is about, because music has become pacification. It is not about this, what you said, the musical warrior mentality, but I want you to talk about the idea of the first time, and it could have been with these cats, when you realized that there was there's a real musical language. And I part of the reason I do my show is I don't want that to get lost on my daughters and future generations because of the emphasis on digitization. The idea that the drum is is you have the ability to communicate through the drum, and you can transcribe Elvin Jones solos, but the transcendent quality of music, was that the first time that you understood that?
that's when I really started to become conscious of it. Absolutely. You know, I don't have a lot of stories, but one of my favorite. When I was in New York, I saw Elvin Jones at the Village Vanguard, and I got to hang out with him for a little bit. And again, the wise master, like he said, all these young guys come up and say, I can play you better than you. And he said, he says, but you can't copy the spirit. And that was his lesson to me. He says, listen to the spirit, listen to your heart, play your heart. Nobody can copy that. Find your own voice. And he gave me a hug, and I swear to God, my chest was on fire. His life force was like unbelievable.
Yeah, when I've done 2 interviews with Bill Cosby, and he used to take before the world fell in on him, and he used to take Camille after his stand-up comedy routine. He would open for someone like Ramblin' Jack Elliott or the Gaslight, and then he'd roll over to see the Coltrane Quartet and with Camille before she was his wife, and every time at intermission, Elvin would come over soaking through his suit and giving her a big hug, soaking wet, and he wasn't, it's hard to look, but it pains me to see what's happened to Cos, because he, he was a patron of this incredible music. The more cats I talked to, though, you said they were going for it. The guys were going for it. That was what you said.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I'm just, deep listening and reaching deep within your spirit and, tapping into the energy and just calling forth like this. I don't know exactly how to say it, just calling forth, getting out of the way and letting the music really come forth, and just going for it, just playing as hard as you can, listening, getting as deep into it as you can. It's like it's you really feel the meditative quality when great players are playing. That's the other thing. You can hear guys play a lot of notes and they're not saying anything. Then you can hear some guys and all of a sudden the language is there and you really feel them talking to you. Well, what is that? It's hard to really define, but it's a spirit type. It's an energy, a pure energy that's speaking through, as the music, and it connects with the listener, and that's love, man.
That is, and one of the L's on my show is love. So, did you? Could
I hope I'm not rambling too much.
This is a stream of consciousness. No, I was it's getting you out of your normal mindset. That's all what the Jake Feinberg show is about. But the thing is, the first L of my show is leadership, and I just wanted you to talk about some unorthodox leadership styles that influenced you. I don't know if you were a leader of a band ever, but the nonverbal leadership styles. I remember when I interviewed Jack DeJohnette, and Elvin, I think, didn't show up for the last set in Chicago. Jack had been playing locally for a while, and the club owner told Train, he said, hey, let this guy play with you. It was with McCoy, Jimmy Garrison. And Train didn't say anything. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just looked at him, and they went up, and they burned. And he said that Train, DeJohnette said that every set you got higher and higher and higher to the point where people were literally, it was like a sanctified church. People were having out-of-body experiences. But I guess my point is that he didn't use any language, no verbal language. And I'm just curious about an unorthodox leadership style that maybe had an effect on you, or something that you can give to other artists, because we live in a very, clearly we're talking right now, it's just a very verbal time right now.
Well, that's a good question. What comes to me is the project that I'm doing now with my wife. My wife and I have a sound healing project, Let me back up a little bit. In my early 20s, when I was in the San Francisco scene, there was always this desire in me to play music that help people see how beautiful they are. Kind of not how great I am, but made people feel beautiful. So as far as a leadership thing, I think that's been one of the main motivations throughout my musical path. was, always kind of like listening and following, trying to find that music, and ended up playing with the, different combinations of people where it came together, and it was really great, but nothing really stuck for a variety of reasons. Everybody had different stuff to do, not really willing to commit totally to the project, and, blah, blah, blah. Life goes on. That's been like, as a leader, that's been my main feeling, is like, I know that there's going to be this music that's going to be really great, and it's going to, it's going to be the fulfillment of my spiritual essence, my musical essence, and it's going to, like, affect people in a really beautiful way. So I've kind of, like, just, held that my whole life, watched, always kind of, like, tried different things, and finally it's really coming into place now, where I'm hearing, music that I never knew was possible. My wife and I, we have a great percussionist, John Marshall, who plays with us, world-class tabla, Eastern, percussion, blah, 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 and a shakuhachi player, Carl Spicer from New York City, who was also a great jazz bass player. So this combination of people, I couldn't have possibly imagined. But it was like the fulfillment of something I knew was supposed to happen. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, you're nailing it.
Keep holding it, believing it, and then the right people will show up. So and the music we're doing now is really great, and it's all totally improvised. When we go to a concert, we just drop in and play, and amazing music happens. So it's like anyway, it's great. So leadership-wise, I just say, I've never really been the leader of a band. I put some projects together, but it was always sort of collaborative. But as far as like a leader, I would say that this, I feel it because I'm rambling here. I'm leading and following at the same time. You know what I mean?
Don't say you're rambling anymore. Okay, you're doing fine. Okay. We're having a ball. Listen, the thing is, okay. So it's clearly evolved over the last 45 plus years, this healing music. When you first started it, genuinely, how would you try to make music for the audience? Can you go a little bit deeper? Was it based on their body language and you could tell they were getting off on it, or how did that work early on, not as a more seasoned player?
Okay, well, early on, I remember sometimes playing. I think one of the first times I really became aware of it was like when I was playing at a bar, the Pelicans, Rusty Pelican in Alameda, California, playing with this band. And I remember feeling my energy filling the room. Not the sound, but I could just feel my energy going out, and it was connecting with everybody. And then when that happens, you can just sense that, okay, what I'm doing is you can see it and feel it happening with people. You can feel when the connection's happening, and you can feel when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, that's sort of when it started, and then it's definitely grown from there. But, I mean, I play with a band now, Otis and the Hurricanes, which is a smoking Louisiana, funk band out here in Connecticut. And it's the same energy. It's like when we're playing, you could feel the energy in the room, and I can feel, obviously, the grooves are making people dance and making people smile. So, it's the groove, but it's more than that. It's like it's an energy and a connection that happens with everybody in the room that's very palpable,
We have a game on this program, Rick, called Name That Tune. I'm going to put this in, and then we'll come back and break it down, okay?
Okay.
music on the Jake Feinberg Show, sponsored in part by the Stereo Hospital, the Circle Tree Ranch, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and the Jewish Community Center of Southern Arizona. We thank them for their support. All right, Mr. Quintanal, what do you got for us, brother?
That's Spirit.
You nailed it. Spirit by...
Well, I cheated. I looked on my iTunes.
And that's all right. You know, we had already jumped the shark by talking about it, but as best you can you talk about the Cats in that band and how the band came together?
The band started as West Coast Natural Gas up in Seattle, and
right.
That's where Matthew was at, and Steve Mack, the lead guitarist, and Pat Craig, the keyboardist, were the main members, and then they ended up moving down to San Francisco, and then I'm not exactly how the whole band formed before I found them, but
did they have it?
Interestingly enough,
yeah.
When I played with Don Ellis's band, we played at Basin Street West in San Francisco, and it was a smoking gig, and there was these two guys that came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh man, you're really great," blah blah blah, you know, because I had the double bass drum, the big solos worked out, and all that stuff, you know. So then later, when I found out this band was looking for a drummer, and I went to the audition, those were the two of the guys. It was Pat and Rex, one of the other guitar players in the band. So that was a kind of a match made in heaven.
Seems like that was the way. I mean, it seems so self-evident now with all the. It seems I interviewed Floyd Sneed from Three Dog Night. That's how they found him, and more. Just so many musicians that were supporting the music scene. Did they have a trap drummer before Quintanal?
They did.
And
I'm
he
not
wasn't
exactly sure what happened with that, but it kind of worked out because, man, when we played together, it was heaven. It was so great because for me, it was a combination of the music was great. It was definitely rock, but it was also had big band qualities to it, the big band hits, and then 7 guys sang, so the vocals were fantastic. And the music was very spiritually oriented. I mean, that particular song, that's the middle section. The first part,
it's all chanting.
Is a big, magnificent, although we didn't record it that well, and I feel bad about that, but that's another story. But, the spirit so high man has been since time began, and loving and living two are the only one. Please don't apologize when you depend upon me. Those are kind of the words they were singing. It's like, yeah.
I mean, it's just... I was listening this morning, sort of in my own little meditative state, and I was just waiting for, the rhythm to come in, and literally the rhythm doesn't come in for about 4.5 or 5 minutes.
Right.
It's really.
And we had played that way better live. When we went into the studio, that was sort of like near the end of the band. It was like a lot of tension was going on, and I mean, I'm grateful that we got what we got. My favorite cut on that is Shadow Larks. I think that's the one that best represents what the band was sounding like. And the other tunes are there, but we played them way better than that live, So, but that's the way it goes sometimes,
No, the question I have for you is because the lyrics are so powerful and emotive, and there's so much introspection. And again, you could talk about the Byrds or the Grateful Dead or Jeff. It goes across the board.
Right.
You can personalize it and also expand on it from a macro point of view. I mean, how much did psychedelics play a role in the expansion or the combining of all these genres of music? Like you said, you had this soul and funk. I'm not sure if funk was even a part of the lexicon at that point, but you had funky blues, you had big band, you had okay. I mean, how much do you account for your psychedelic experience and your consciousness opening? And not just for the pipe, but just for that time period in general and the bands that were doing their thing.
You mean psychedelic, the music, or the psychedelics involved?
The LSD.
Yeah, I did a little bit of mescaline. I never got really heavy into really tripping, but it had some effect, and of course marijuana at that time, it just opened you up, to I guess the main thing, it got the ego out of the way and enabled you to look at stuff differently. Now, I don't recommend it, and there's better ways of doing it, but it definitely had it caused a shift shift in consciousness. I say it caused. How can I say this? It seemed to enable a shift in consciousness, so you could just look at things differently and get a little bit deeper inside the music and inside the sound.
Mm.
I don't think I ever really did before. I mean, I played, but and I played a lot of good music, but there was another level of, when you really get into meditating while you're playing, where all of a sudden you are the music, you are the sound.
I'm leading into the next question, because part of my show focuses on the metaphysical, and could you talk to the audience? It doesn't have to be that you were tripping out, but can you talk about an out-of-body experience playing the drums when you felt like maybe you were on the you were on the side of the stage and you were looking at yourself playing, but you were actually playing?
Okay, well, the biggest one that comes to mind is I used to play with a friend of mine, Tim Rosencrantz, and we'd just play. There was this basement in San Francisco. We would just play just drums and sax, and again, we would go for it. I mean, just drumming, And right in the middle of one of those sessions where we were like just full bore energy, I had this vision of becoming this lion, and my mane was like the ocean waves, and I was ascending to the top of this mountain. And this is all while the music is still playing, and he became like the phoenix, this firebird, and we were ascending to the top. It was like kind of going to the great mountain where the gods were, and we wanted to commune with the gods. And then I fell short, didn't quite make it, ended up back in an Indian village. And my wife, Mana, which is a name for the life force, told me, it's okay, you're going to make it. And it was one of those sort of vision quests, life vision quests.
Wow, this is great. And this was in a basement.
And that happened while we were playing. Yeah, it was just one of those, whoa, totally transported to another place. So I got a glimpse. And interestingly enough, I mean, it's like that was one of the big markers for my life. It's like, keep going, just keep going. You're going to do it. Don't give up. Be patient. Just stay at it. So that was the biggest one. To be honest.
So I mean, everyone's has different ones. I mean, a lot of people talk about, I just interviewed Larry Coryell last week, and. It doesn't matter who they are. McLaughlin. A lot of the guys were looking to transcend.
Absolutely.
But alter consciousness without chemicals. Without the hard.
Absolutely.
So that's what you're describing, and for them though it had more to do with, for them it was Sri Chinmoy, gurus that really helped them, sort of
Yeah.
Without, and I mean, I'm not even talking about pot or LSD. I'm talking about more like heroin or coke or that kind of stuff. But I remember interviewing Michael Shreve, and him and Carlos Santana, when they were playing, they were looking at their friends, and these people were dying all around them because of the drug use, and it was like roadkill, and they were very interested in connecting with this type of jazz, this burning spiritual jazz that was occurring at the time, and they did that, and because they didn't want to die, right. and I just wondered if you ever, I guess, if you could point to a time in your career, doesn't have to be drug abuse, but if there was a time in your career where you faced some adversity, and how you were able to overcome it, if you could give an example of that.
Oh boy. Oh, this could be a long story. Well, when I was playing in the Bay Area, in the 70s, I had met this spiritual teacher, because that was sort of one of the things. It was spiritual teacher time in planet Earth, and we met this teacher, and I was married at the time, and, well, I don't want to tell the whole long story. Anyway, we ended up moving to Tucson, ended up leaving Tucson, coming back to here. Then she was killed in a car crash. Wow. So it was a vehicular homicide. So that was a major blow in my life. And then after that, I ended up coming out. That's how I ended up on the East Coast, coming out to study with this teacher. And then I had, was hanging in New York trying to meet people, blah, 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 but I needed to get grounded. I knew that I needed to get really grounded, so I started doing tree work. I worked for a tree company in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I never stopped playing, but I wasn't playing that. Actually, I played with a band called Yasgur's Farm at that time, which played, obviously the Woodstock stuff from the Jersey Shore. But anyway, so I went through this, period of studying with the teacher, playing. But then I started really losing myself, and I got involved in drinking, like a lot of other people. And then it got to the point where, I was kind of ready to give up. I figured, okay, well, I had a good life, it's about it. And actually, during that time, too, I had recorded an album of my original stuff. And when it was all finished, I said, hey, this sounds pretty good.
Right.
Maybe I ought to stick around and see what happens, And then some other things happened. But anyway, I woke up, whatever that is, they say hitting bottom or whatever that realization is for people. It occurs in so many different ways, but there's just a point where the spirit says, okay, I'm back, It's time to wake up. You've had enough of that,
Did you,
and then,
you think, Coriel, I just transcribed it yesterday and disseminated it on Facebook, but it was just a powerful story. It was the early 80s. He had already been in rehab 4 times. This was the 5th time. And he said he thought he was going to die, and at the time, he was collaborating with the guitarist Philip Catherine, and they were doing, there was a lot of money on the table, there was a lot of opportunities for more records, and he used the allusion to C.C. Sabathia, the Yankee pitcher who just, he went into alcohol, AA, and the timing was not great for the Yankees when he went in, but Larry just said, for me, it was, there was all this opportunity out there, and I knew I had hit rock bottom.
Right.
But would you account it to say that it was the listening to this original music you made that helped you, or did this? And what is the teacher's name that you had?
Well, the teacher's name was Kenneth Mills, and I had left that years earlier. I left that behind because I was sort of hiding after my wife's accident. I I felt really guilty about a lot of stuff, so I ended up kind of giving up my power to the teacher, and kind of going through life, but not really claiming responsibility for my life, so hence, alcohol fit into that beautifully because you don't have to take responsibility for anything, But the whole time, again, I was still playing, and I was still, a spiritual, quote-unquote, guy, but I was actually with this lady, Helen, who was a great lady, and we had our relationship was really important, a really important part of my life, and I remember walking down the streets with her in New York, and we had just come from this church, and I'm talking all this spiritual stuff, blah blah blah, and she looked at me and she said, "You're bullshit." Mm-hmm. So you're talking all this stuff, but look at how you're not living it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it was like, bam, that was the point for me. It's like when I realized, man, I'm bullshit. I'm sorry, forgive me for using that language, but you're not real.
No, I know. It's and at 37, I can honestly say that everyone has different experiences, but in your heart, if you're a fraud or whether you're towing that line, or if you're practicing what you preach, you can. Part of it is that I can get a lot of stuff out of my system, talking to you guys and getting this out into the to the ethos. But at the end of the day, you also have to. I don't know. I think the life experience of losing somebody close to you, and then that, it's a powerful thing. And it's what's even more remarkable is that you were very despondent, and then actually were able to ride out that storm, overcome it, and keep grooving, and now to the point where you're still actively involved playing incredibly holistic music.
Yeah, well, and I have to say, during music was always sort of my saving grace. Always being able to play, and sometimes it wasn't much, but it was always the spirit of the music kept me going a lot. I gotta say that.
Well, we got another piece of music here to play for you, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay. Another test?
No, you got this one.
I see a crowd of people traveling like them. Life is a one-way road for all kinds and all colors. One-way road from today to tomorrow. A one-way road as far and wide as you let it be. Road with a place just made for my love. A one-way road. A crowd of people traveling on a one-way road. City woman sitting tight, waiting till the price is right. Country woman by a pond, watching the dawn. Some boys are ringing their bells, some girls are setting themselves on the notion that the only way to be is like them. Life is a one-way road for all kinds and all colors. One-way
Straight ahead here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Music brought to you by Abbott Taylor Jewelers and the Circle Tree Ranch. Thank you for your support. All right, Mr. Quintanal, what do you got?
It's a one-way road, but it gets pretty windy sometimes.
Yeah, but I was going to say, you just always got to go straight ahead. You got to
You
keep
do, that's
got to keep
true.
moving forward. So,
Best way out is through,
right, exactly. And I, as much as I regret not, can you talk about playing in this? David Hayes was on bass. Was that cut? Was there any overdubbing, or do you guys do that live? Everybody in the studio, Herbie, yourself, everybody. Can you paint that picture?
Oh, with Victoria?
Yeah.
That was pretty much live. Yeah, we just played it live. As far as I remember.
Did you know who Herbie was at that time? You must.
Oh, absolutely.
So, what was that experience? Had you played? You hadn't played with him before.
No. I knew Mike Clark, but I had never met Herbie before. So yeah, all of a sudden you're in the studio with Herbie Hancock. That's kind of fun and a little intimidating, obviously. But you're there, so I guess you're supposed to be there, But it was, I'd have to really jog my memory, but I just remember. I really look forward to hearing that again because I have no clue what we even did at this point.
You have no idea how
it works.
Yeah, this is like this is one of those albums. I don't think I've ever heard. He did some work with the Pointer Sisters, but that was totally different. This was like I've never heard Herbie play music like that. And even though at the time he was also doing M1 Dishi, which was like 20 minute space jams. You mentioned Mike Clark, but what about? Did you know Dean Chaperlees?
No.
Yeah, he was. So I'm trying to figure out the how you originally met David Garibaldi, because I know that he was playing in a band called Reality Sandwich down on Broadway with Mike Clark.
We went to junior college together.
Where was that?
In Chabot and Hayward, California.
So can you talk about how you met Garibaldi and how your relationship grew from there?
Well, we met in junior college, and we were obviously studying with our teacher, Mr. Gene Graves, and so we were in school together, and that was a period where we were like, still are, and at that time, really good friends, hung out a lot, played together. In fact, there's this picture, if I can find it.
Please.
Remember Rich versus Roach, that famous
Oh,
album?
yeah.
Dave and I took a picture with our two drum sets together. If I find that, I'll send that to you.
No, you need to find that, man. Because he talked.
But we were, we just met in college and played. And at that time, I was like, the jazz guy, and listening to Tony Williams, and going for that kind of stuff. And Dave was checking out Bernard Purdy, and really starting to hone his craft as a great funk drummer. So that was like, and then he went into the Air Force after that. But that was just out of college. That's how we knew each other.
And I was going to say, did you spend time? You mentioned that basement, the transcendent experience with the gods in the basement with the horn player. Garibaldi talked about playing, just getting together with a drummer named Harvey Hughes, who played with Cold Blood, and they would sit in one of their apartments for hours just working on different rhythms and beats and did you guys get together and just work out stuff, original stuff? And even if not, why do you believe that your generation of musicians was so dedicated to individual sound, whereas today it's so hard to depict? You hear somebody, you don't know who they are, but back then, whether it was Mickey Roker or whether it was Art Blakey or Max Roach, Buddy Rich, you knew who was playing drums.
Absolutely.
So I'm just trying to figure out if you guys, part of it, individual sound to me comes from just experimentation. So did you guys get together and experiment a lot together?
Not that I remember. I mean, we played at college, but I don't remember us really. We didn't really spend time working out stuff together. We played, but it wasn't that we didn't really dig in like that together. And the only thing that I can think of is that period. It was just wide open, and there was a lot of stuff hadn't occurred yet. Like now, there's like the sound is so much, YouTube and this and that and iTunes and da-da-da-da-da, you hear so much, you're influenced by so many sounds. And in those days, I think we were influenced, but I think also there was a wide open field. And it was a very creative time, in America, it's like, and there was the sense that you could go for it. There was all sort of like this, I don't know exactly how to say it, like this unsung request for you to find yourself musically.
Mm-hmm.
What
about
encouraged, and people played together. That was the other thing that was great. We got together and played with so many different bands and different people. You want to come over and play? Oh, absolutely. There was a lot of that back then, way more than now, I think. But I'm sure it's happening somewhere. But at that time, people just got together and, like you say, work stuff out, try things, experiment. Anything was possible. Was the feeling.
Absolutely. In our remaining moments here, I wanted to just ask you about a lot of modern music. I mean, you could turn on FM radio during the free-form period and hear a lot of different music. It could have been Seals and Crofts or Steely Dan, or it could have been anybody. And a lot of those studio cats like Jim Keltner, those guys, they were jazz snobs. They were fanatical jazz guys, and they played with dynamics. And I don't hear any dynamics in pop music today.
Yeah.
And I think that it's one of those things that I'm just trying to identify the antecedents to figure out how we got here. And I point to the drum machine, disco, cocaine, and the idea now that it's really more about how many followers you have on Twitter as opposed to whether you really are a good musician or not. And I guess just give me a little bit of encouragement aside from your own gigs, that give me a shining glimmer of hope that you see coming around the corner, a new age of authenticity in improvisational music. And you can say no.
Again, what we're doing is definitely big time dynamics, big time listening, and I've been hearing a lot of new artists, that are playing music that's absolutely beautiful and amazing and totally deep in the spiritual pocket, full of dynamics and meaning. So I mean, I think it's like anything, the media is such that there's so much stuff that you have to wade through. The loud stuff usually gets heard first, but there's a lot of really great musicians and great beings that are bringing forth some fabulous new music. That I mean, it's happening. I can't name anybody right off the top here, but it's happening. There's a lot of great music happening, and sounds that we've never heard before, and rhythms we've never heard before, and all kinds of stuff.
So you're playing with John Marshall?
John Marshall, yeah, he's an absolutely fabulous percussionist.
Yeah, I'm trying to. How long has his career been? I mean, does he go back to your generation, or is he younger?
Oh yeah, no, he's about the same age. He goes way back. I mean, God, who was his? Oh man, he just said it the other day. I can't remember.
I'm going to need to get a hold of that cat because there was a Jack Marshall that played with Shelly Manne, but he was a guitar player.
John Marshall, you would love. He's a great musician, a great guy, big heart, big spirit, and a teacher. And he's got the gift of gab. He'd be a phenomenal interview with you. He's fun to talk.
Well, you did pretty darn well, man. We cooked for an hour here, and But I know this came out of the blue. I got to tell you, though, I mean, I started it'd be 5 years in January. I didn't really start hitting on the musicians till about 3 months in. And a lot of cats like Pat Martino and Junie Booth, Alphonse Mouzon, all these guys, Henry Franklin, so many heavyweight guys, not pop guys, but heavyweight guys, unsung characters, helped me find my voice to the point where, now it's a thriving show, really not about theory, but about philosophy, wisdom, and love. And now you're part of it, Quintanal. So I really appreciate
Well,
it.
you've touched me in a very deep way, and I'm really honored, and really, really touched that you thought of me and called me. I'm kind of blown away here. So,
well, just do me a favor.
it.
Send me your address, and I'll mail you out that copy of. You still have a vinyl player to play Victoria on?
Nope. I might find something. I
Yeah,
guess.
you're gonna have to find something. I'll send you a copy of that because I'll tell you. That's why I found you, and I knew somehow we'd get into the Doc Ellis 11/9 stuff, and I'm glad we did. So thanks for taking the time, man. We'll be in touch.
Jake, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
Have a beautiful day.
You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
That's it. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see y'all in a little bit.